With the Morgana materials, the basis of what we discuss and the information that I translate has to do with life and what life is about and literally what life is. And that information is actually not my opinion. It doesn't come from me. It's not new information. You can trace the information back in one guise or another for thousands of years since we've had written, recorded history, where somehow or another that's tried to be explained. And so when I access the purity of what I do in that pure knowing with the Morgana materials, that's where that information comes from. So it has very little to do with my opinion. When I get more into the personal coaching or the business coaching or the one-on-one, then I do bring in my experience and the benefit or lack thereof sometimes of what I've had and my beliefs and my opinions and everything that I've gathered with my life. But in that sense, I don't convey it as this is absolutely true and this is what you need to believe. I convey it as my experience. So I don't really do personal tapes because what happens with me and to me personally really is irrelevant to you and your experience in your life. However, death is such a potentially painful subject for most people when they've had a death of a loved one touch them. And I have had significant experiences with death in my life, as well as talking to dead people. I don't see dead people, but I can interact with dead people. So to share those personal experiences with people, to see if you get something from it. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. But if you do it, it might help a little bit, and that's why I've been asked to do this and why I've agreed. If you take a look at the website, morganamaterials.com, with the S on it, materials, morganamaterials.com, there's a rather lengthy explanation about how I started as an intuitive and more about what that is. So I'm not really going to get into the specifics of that here. But briefly, I sort of popped out of the womb this way. I have always been able to do this, to know what was going on with someone, their body, their life, information that I would access as a small child, but I would understand. The gentleman that lived next door to us worked for NASA, and where I didn't understand the calculations and formulations and things, I did understand the concepts of what he was working on. It flowed through my brain. So it's almost as if my brain was aligned with his so much that I was thinking his thoughts almost. But after several very bad experiences, I stopped doing that, and I learned to mistrust it and not do that. And one of those really negative experiences came when I was around 7. And my parents did not have a great relationship with themselves or each other. And one of the sources of conflict was my father's mother, who was very, very ill. And I got sick. I was sick a lot as a child. I was a very sickly child. And I was not close with my grandmother. I did not have an affinity for her particularly at all, my dad's mother. And it was very strange to me because I felt her and I heard her while it was, I don't know, chicken pox and mumps. It was one of the real serious childhood diseases. And I had a very, very high fever. And I knew she was dying. And one of the discussions, the loud, most people call argumentative discussions that my parents had, was regarding my father going to be with his mother because she thought she was dying often. It was a lovely little game that they played. And so this time my mother had put her foot down and said, "You're not going. If you leave, we're not going to be here when you get back." And so my father did not go. I had the interaction with my grandmother right then while they're having the argument in the kitchen. Then I knew she was dying. And I knew that this wasn't one of the games. This was the real deal, and this was happening. My father did not go, and she died. And I conveyed this knowledge to my parents before they found out, before the phone call came in that said, she's dead. I told them that she was dying and that she was dead, and they asked me how I knew that. And I said, well, she told me. And then the phone call came in, and yes, she was dead. So based on my parents' experiences and their backgrounds and their lives up to that point, what that meant to them is that I was possessed by the spirit of the devil, and as far as my mother was concerned, I was possessed by the spirit of my evil grandmother, as she put it. Well, and that's kind of confusing, and it's kind of scary to a little kid, because I didn't feel that way and I didn't think so, but then I was different. Nobody else really did what I did and talked to dead people. And my grandmother tried to speak to me more, but because I didn't like her and because there was this horrible everything surrounding this, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. Yet, from that time, when I would be around someone who was about to leave, about to die, I would know it. There's a change in their energy. There's a change in their entire being, as if the broader part of their being is preparing for it. I had gotten away from that pretty much when I distrusted this thing that I do, and when it was more of a burden than it was a benefit. I was an adult. My father and I were estranged for a good number of years. We didn't have the best relationship. We hadn't talked in well over 10 years. And I suddenly spiked an incredible fever. Very high fever. It knocked me out. I went to bed. I wasn't frightened of it. I don't get frightened when my body is trying to handle something, but it was very strange because I didn't have any corresponding symptoms. And after about 3 days of just this amazing fever, and I couldn't think, I couldn't move, it was really awful. But other than that, my body was functioning fine. I went to the doctor, and she said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You don't have an infection. I cannot tell you why your fever is 104. So she said, I can't even give you anything for it because I don't know what to medicate. And I said, well, see, that's what I thought. I don't think there's anything wrong with me either, but I guess I'll go home and just back to bed. I dragged myself back to bed, and I went to her twice again because this lasted for 10 days. And in the middle of the night on the 10th day, it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. And I thought it was very, very strange. There was no residual after effect. There was no problem. There was no nothing. I was just fine. All of a sudden, I'd been fine, nasty fever, fine again. Very strange. And my dad started rolling around on my mind, which was very odd because I didn't think of him. I had made peace in my own mind, in my own world with our relationship, so he just never crossed my mind. So to have him on my mind was very odd.